I'm Prachi Mishra. I'm a tech policy fellow at the University of Chicago. And I'm also a research consultant with the Center for Integrated and Holistic Studies, shortened as CIHS. CIHS is a global think tank. It's very new. It's based in Delhi, India. And we look at knowledge and information from the Bharatiya perspective. Feel free to check the website for more of our content. With the University of Chicago, my work has largely been on the ethics of quantum computing and quantum technologies. And my regional focus is South Asia, Quad, and India especially. And my project is largely around framing ethical frameworks, like coming up with modules that can help India and South Asia ease into the quantum transition. I would like to, I'm here to share a few of my learnings from my research and also about civilizational connect of science and tech. How can we trace back our modern science and technology or other emerging technologies back to our literature? Bhartrihari, in his work Vakyapadiya, so Vakyapadiya is a Sanskrit literature, linguistics, which probably details on how to frame Sanskrit sentences. He says, Anupasata Vriddhi Nama Vidya Nati Prasiddhi, which means that science does not smile upon those who deny the ancients. So when I started studying quantum science, I could find an undeniable link between the works of J. Robert Oppenheimer, who is the father of the atom bomb, also Nikola Tesla, Carl Sagan, Niels Bohr, Erwin Schrödinger, and most of the physicists of the last century. So apart from laying the bedrock of modern physics, which is classical and quantum physics both, these exemplary geniuses always came back to Vedanta. So if you look into the life of Oppenheimer, he will constantly talk about Bhagavad Gita. If you look at Niels Bohr, Nikola Tesla, they will always say that there is more to the universe apart from classical mechanics or Newtonian mechanics. And they always come back to quantum science and they always link it with Vedanta. So I figured out that we Indians, all of us, we are custodians of astronomical amounts of generational knowledge. And be it cryptology, geology, science, any science, biology, astronomy, computer algorithms, surgery, astrophysics and all these disciplines, there is sufficient and significant recorded evidence that modern and ancient systems of science and technology have roots in our ancient literature. So there are a few case studies which I'll briefly describe here. One of the most relevant examples in the modern day is of Srinivasa Ramanujan. So Ramanujan would often credit Indian poetry and music. By Indian I mean Tamil and Sanskrit both. And he could fathom the depths of Sri Bhartrihari's statements. So he would say that I listen to Indian poetry, I listen to music, and I'm able to figure out mathematical models. I'm able to see patterns, I'm able to see identities, I'm able to see mathematical formulae in those identities. So in his very short lifespan, he gave over 4,000 of such mathematical models, identities, formulae, which we are still decoding, by the way. We are just, I think, done 10%. And the most relevant work from Ramanujan's research is on quantum cryptography. So researchers in Japan, South Korea, even the United States, they are looking into Ramanujan's formulae, so he just says x equal y. He doesn't give out any proof. So scientists all over the world, they are trying to prove these identities and these formulae. And everybody says that they can be used in post-quantum cryptography, which means that what will encryption look like when we enter the quantum era, which by the way is not going to be too far. I'm hoping it should be there in the next 10, 12 years or so. However, much before Ramanujan was born, around 4th century BC, much before he was there, we had this famous Vedic and Brahmin scholar Vatsyayana, who is credited with writing the Kama Shastra. He gave the concept of encryption, so it's called Nechita Vikalpa. And apparently scientists in the West, they credit Vatsyayana as the father of encryption. And he's famous for giving the Kama Shastra cipher, which is way before we had the Caesar cipher. Similarly, if we look into Surya Siddhant, which is again a Sanskrit treatise on astronomy, again the author is debatable because it dates back to golden time. Some people say it's Mayasura, some people say it's Aryabhatta, but we really don't know who really is the author. So Surya Siddhant, it exposes mathematical models developed for understanding celestial bodies, also gauging the expanse of the universe, also fathoming distances between these celestial bodies, like what is the distance between moon and sun, what is the distance between earth and moon, how many moons does Jupiter really has, and such things, and also say the concept of gravity, formation of nebulae, even rocket science to an extent. And the interrelated movement between Earth and other celestial bodies. So this is all there. It's written in Sanskrit, beautiful poetry, and but largely underexplored, right? Now, one fascinating observation which I never knew I would stumble upon is Jyotish Shastra. So I've been studying Jyotish Shastra for a couple of years now, and I was really stumped to find the basics of quantum computing embedded in Jyotish Shastra. So I studied computer science as an undergraduate student. So for any people who know computer science here would know the nested for loop, which is perhaps one of the most primary elements of classical computing. That nested for loop can be traced back to the Vimshottari Mahadasha system of the Shastra. So it's so nicely beautiful and perfectly articulated in the Brihad Parashapura Shastra. And again, we don't really tend to find these linkages. Similarly, we also have Hitopadesha, which talks about data privacy. It also talks about encryption, but largely, again, very underexplored. So indeed, ancient India, it has many gems of scientific development, which are quite relevant for India and the world at large today. So, and as we're approaching the Amrit Kaal, like we've been talking about it, in fact, our Prime Minister at the Indian Science Congress this year, he was talking about quantum tech. We should perhaps explore more of such linkages, and we should invest more into exploring the ancient wisdom and tying it to modern science, tech and development. One thing to note here is that we don't undermine, we should not undermine modern scientific temper. We should not undermine modern scientific innovation and development. It's just that we should use ancient wisdom to get a holistic idea of what we're looking into. And that's precisely what we've been doing in Chicago and also at CIHS. That we want to look at systems holistically, we don't want to look at things in a siloed perspective. With this, I really thank Abhinavji for giving me this space and time to express my views on a global platform rather. Right? And I really hope, and I sometimes also expect it from our scientific and academic community, that we learn from the past to progress towards sustainability. Thank you.
It was a bit short. I'm sure there's so much more in this than the kind of context that you set. But my question is that if some of these things are getting established, that there is a deep understanding of the universe, and there was a whole lot of science and technology in our ancient scriptures, and some of the people that you mentioned, some of the pundits, what is it that institutions that you are associated with can proliferate this fact to larger sections of society, not just in India, but universally? Because, the warped history that we have of the country is that there was the Mughal period, there was the British period, and after that we had 75 years of independence. But there is the 5,000 years of history which has some of these facets which you are now trying to establish scientifically, that there is a linkage between what was written, even if it was written in the form of poetry, but there was science behind that. How does one really spread this across the world, that there is a, it's not just the Greek civilization and it's not just the Indus Valley, and there's a lot more. So my question is that with the platforms that you are associated with, how much of the spreading of the message, a factual sharing of knowledge is possible to be achieved, so that the rest of the world knows that there is a history behind the history that is hitherto known as India?
Thank you for your large organizations. But apart from that, there are many researchers in the world. I can name many of them. For instance, we have Dr. Manjul Bhargava, who is working at Princeton. He's a professor at Princeton. He's taking his classes, he teaches mathematics, right? And he's taking his classes through Sanskrit poetry. For undergraduate students, he's introduced Sanskrit poetry, and through those, he's introducing the concepts of mathematics. The new education policy that we have, which was formulated in 2020 and rolled out and has been implemented, I think, in a couple of states. These initiatives, they are there in place just so we can look back to look ahead. And I think this is a revolution of a kind. It's not a solo person's job. Not one body, not one individual, one institution can do it. It has to be based on, say, network of networks. So we need to leverage the potential of networks. If I write a paper on quantum tech and I trace it back to Kanad Rishi, and it's the job of several different institutions to forward those papers, forward those research pieces to relevant stakeholders in the global ecosystem. So the first and the foremost thing is to identify an ecosystem, like who are the principal actors in this ecosystem, who are the stakeholders. And then we also need to have really good sound research. We just cannot, WhatsApp University is not going to work here, and nor is Quora or Google Search going to work here. We need experts in language. And that is, I think, that's where I think NEP is really good in place, that it's investing a lot into language, linguistics. So in fact, our institution, which CIHS, it has a huge network, and we're also associated with people at the Ministry of Culture and also senior folks at Ministry of Education. So recently we also had a podcast with Sri Chammukrishna Shastriji, who's the founder of Samskrit Bharati, and he's been promoting this kind of work for decades now. So through such media, we can disseminate this information, but I think the root of your question, the answer to the root of your question is to first do the research. We need language experts. I think that's one thing which we are missing right now. There are very few people who are interested in, exploring ancient Indian languages. And that's where I think, that's where also my comment on network of networks is relevant. So we need to associate with Tamil scholars, we also need to associate with Gujarati, Marathi scholars, with scholars in Kannada literature, scholars in Kashmiri literature, scholars in Sanskrit literature. And then we need to figure out, okay, what is the kind of research we have, how can we go more into these shastras. You said 5,000, sir, I would probably say it's much beyond that, much beyond that. Because the Surya Siddhanta is almost, I think, it's 11,000 years old or something. So, yeah.
I have a question. Foremost authorities on Sanskrit, they wrote a research paper saying that Sanskrit is a dead language. And, but on the other hand, you see, a lot of research going on, especially in, I believe in 17 universities in Germany. They have a department of Sanskrit where they are doing an in-depth research. And there is also talk about Sanskrit is likely to be, the only language in which, globally a voice-based computing can be done. Because the accent remains, it's the only language where whether a British speaks Sanskrit or the phonetic is such that people from any part of the world speak Sanskrit, so the accent remains the same. So how do you look at, this dichotomy that on the one hand, the foremost authorities on Sanskrit, the so-called foremost authorities on Sanskrit, they are saying that Sanskrit is a dead language. In the West, they are saying it. And simultaneously, there is a lot of research going on. And what exactly is basically the situation? How do we look at, the future of Sanskrit?
So interesting. Have a reserved judgment for scholars like Sheldon Pollock or Audrey Trushkin, these folks. And it's a narrative, I think. It's to see it in the minds of global audience that, this is a dead language. Just the way Greek has sort of died, or Roman culture sort of saw a decline. I think their statement is a dichotomous statement. One, they themselves are researching on Sanskrit and saying it's a dead language. Second, we see scholars here in India who are also working on Sanskrit and Shastras, but the number is very small. So, partly they are correct that the language is dying. I wouldn't say dying, but it is facing like an existential crisis or something. So yeah, we need to revive Sanskrit, the revivalist movement or the revolutionizing Sanskrit literature. That is a need of the hour. I think the West sort of perceives and they know the value of Sanskrit because NASA has been doing a lot of work around using Sanskrit for AI, even generative AI. So there was this paper by Rick Briggs, he wrote in 1985. And he says that, AI models, if they are there any in the future, because he's writing in 85, doesn't know, they can be very well coded in Sanskrit. And today, the problem is that any computing language that you see, it's based on, it is numeric and also it is based on English, which is very problematic. Yeah, you spoke of accents. So the beauty of Sanskrit is that Sanskrit literature is highly oriented in linguistics. There are always meters, you sing, Sanskrit is poetic, and that's why it's going to be uniform across the globe. So of course, yeah, we need to revive those traditions, the ancient traditions of passing down Sanskrit knowledge through poetry and oral recitation rather than just writing. So that is going to be there, of course. Yeah. And coming to these Westerners, I think it's always a narrative. I think they just want to spread around the word that yeah, it's a dead language and no future. I think that's not like the case. Yeah.